Hi everyone, and welcome back to a gigantic sales video, and also congratulations because in the next few days our winner is going to be announced for the Nintendo Switch OLED. Ridiculously, another company has also offered to potentially sponsor another Switch OLED giveaway in January, just because. So keep your eyes out for the community post for this winner. It's going to be right at the end of the year. There'll be a community post going out. That's one you're not going to want to miss. Alright, this is one of those sorry not sorry situations because you're going to have a couple of sales videos. They're going to be back to back and they have some cracking bargains in them. Alright, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. What are the best sales for the end of the year? Well, let's find out. Crosscode has its cheapest ever sale at the moment, taking it down to just $7.55 or your regional equivalent until January the 5th. I did see an interesting take on this the other day. The person played for a few hours and just decided they didn't like the game at all, enough that they actually put it in a video saying how bad it was. It's not really a game, in my opinion, that you can judge on its first few hours. In fact, the storyline only really kicks in after about 5 or 6. And it just gets better and better. Now obviously we're not all going to like the same things, and that's absolutely fine, but for me this is one of the best 2D action RPGs inspired by the 16-bit classics, and it's also a real chunky beast. It's around about 50 to 80 hours long. That narrative is really quite unique in that it feels a bit like Ready Player One. This world has a load of people that go into VR for escapism, and a lot of the antics that take place are within this alternate game in reality. There's a whole bunch of quests, there's also some DLC for those people that really get into it and finish it, but it's the soundtrack that's stuck in my memory, as I guess is so often the case. I'm finally getting around to playing Chrono Trigger. I know, I never played it back in the day. I wasn't going to be one of those people that says, oh that's amazing, when I haven't actually played it. But yeah, I'm playing that on the Super Nintendo at the moment, and my goodness does it live up to the hype, but it's the soundtrack that's sticking out to me. It's one I think I'm going to have to pick up on vinyl. Crosscode at the moment, at this price, I think is an essential pickup. That sale, as I say, goes on until January the 5th. From one absolute great to another in a slightly different genre, it's Phoenotopia Awakenings, which seems to go on sale every Christmas. This one's 60% off though, and I don't know if you ever played the old 2D Zelda, so I think it was called Zelda 2. This is kind of based on that. It's very difficult, and it might not look it just on the surface, but there are some brutal boss fights quite early on. But the exploration is quality. Sometimes I'm going to say that the difficulty veers almost on the too hard side, but then at others it's absolutely manageable, and it is one where you will be getting more and more powerful as you go along, and just in terms of your overall skill levels you'll improve, to the point where those previous challenges just don't really faze you. Believe it or not, this one clocks in at around 50 hours in length. There are a number of different towns and cities, and it's one where there are lots of little nooks and crannies. You'll find little merchants hidden in sewers and things like that. If the idea of this one appeals to you, we do have a full review, so if you want to find out a bit more, then go check that out. That sale for Phoenotopia Awakenings goes on until January the 5th. Larian Studios are on a real winning streak at the moment with their release of Baldur's Gate 3, but for those that aren't in the know, Divinity 2 Original Sin is from the exact same team and essentially could be part of the Baldur's Gate series. It's an old classic style top-down RPG that combines real-time with some turn-based combat. Now I know if you don't like turn-based, you will not like this, because that combat is very much centered around making sensible choices and planning out your moves, and it's difficult. Now the narrative is completely branching. Well, I say completely branching, obviously there is an overarching storyline, but many of the ways that you get there are entirely up to you. You can be a nefarious little cretin who backstabs everyone to try and get some gold coins, or you can be an honourable rogue, or whatever in between really. Now the other platforms had full co-op. I believe they were adding that into the Switch version, but you'll have to let me know. I don't think it's local co-op though. I think the Switch would literally explode. As you can see from the visuals, it's not its best aspect on the Switch console, but it is more than playable, and it will actually look slightly better than what you're seeing because there's been a few patches since this. At £22.49, it's one of the more expensive sales we're going to mention, but for the gameplay experience you're getting, definitely worth adding. And if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, I still think it's worth playing this as it still stands on its own 2 feet. Tunic is one that's taken me quite a while to get around to properly playing. Now, it had a bunch of coverage when it first came out, and there are a lot of fans for it, but for whatever reason, I think I was probably just very busy reviewing other games. I didn't get around to putting too much time into it, and hence we didn't have a review on the channel. This is currently 30% off though until January the 4th, and with that in mind, I did have a little play around. In fact, I think I did some on Game Pass and then played some on Switch, and it's nice to see that the Switch has actually had a number of patches since it first came out. What are you looking at here? Well, it's like a top-down cutesy Souls-like. That's what it feels like when you're playing it. You can roll around, chain together attacks, enemies will squash you. Like, you will be quite surprised by how difficult some of the combat is. But then there are some lovely environmental puzzle sections as well, and one of the best maps I've ever seen. I've completely forgotten the name of that crow game. It looks similar. You'll remember it, I'm sure, in the comments. But this feels a bit like that. So if you enjoyed that game, then yeah, consider this one. But it is one where you are going to have to enjoy difficult experiences. If you want a walk in the park, this will not be for you. It's $20.99 or your regional equivalent, and as I say, that sale goes on until January the 4th. Chained Echoes was many of our game of the year. Was it last year or the year before? I can't even remember anymore. But it hits its cheapest ever at 25% off, which is a complete bargain for the experience you're getting. Now, the designer of this put his heart and soul into it. There isn't an aspect that hasn't been carefully handcrafted. It has that feel of someone that's spent far too long potentially working on something that's a real labour of love. Now, on the surface, it might just look like another pixel art RPG, and I guess in its simplest form it is. But in the same way as I'm picking up Chrono Trigger, and even after literal decades, it plays so well. Chained Echoes is one of those games. From the combat mechanics, which can feel brutally difficult until you finally figure out what works and what doesn't, to the storyline that's filled with those weird little extra characters that they didn't need to make, but they did. And they stick in your memory long beyond maybe some of the main narrative arcs. This is one I would almost certainly say is an essential for your collection. If you like RPGs, especially this style, do go check out the full review. It's £17.24, which I think is just a steal. Such a good game and worth adding to your collection. And right after that, we have Tales of Iron, but specifically, we've got the new Bloody Whiskers content which is released. Now, if you weren't aware this was coming out, it adds in a number of new boss fights, new story missions. It's a nice chunky bit of extra content here. And at the moment, the base game is down 75%. That takes it down to $6.25. This is a Souls-like Metroidvania featuring the voice of Geralt of Rivia in Doug Cockle, and a handsome little rodent who works his way through the kingdom. What surprised me about this one was that it managed to be narratively poignant, shall we say. AKA, I genuinely cared for this, what would usually be a little cretin. It uses that inverse kinematic art style that almost looks like it's a bone tool in the flash animation, but I think when it's done like this, it works, because the quality of the drawing is so good. Performance-wise, it holds up. There are a few slowdowns here and there, but generally very good on Switch, and it plays very nicely on that OLED screen, just due to the contrast in dark and light areas. For this price, if you've not considered it before, now would be a good time to do so and check out our review. Nier Automata had a massive patch earlier this year, which was weird. It always ran well anyway, and now it's 40% off until January the 4th. And I revisited it quite recently and was just so impressed with it. As we've said for many of the titles in what I would say is a very good list in this sale, so many of them don't rely on their graphics or their performance even to maintain your attention. It's that narrative. And this one just, it works on so many levels. It feels like some kind of anime adaptation of the Blade Runner concept. You play as an android sent back to Earth to essentially, no spoilers, but there are multiple endings, and it's not designed to just be played once. It is very much an experience that plays out over several runs, and while that might sound strange, in actuality, it changes each time. So bear that in mind if you've just finished this once, or if you're not sure. Now, the action is very swift. This developer really do know how to do that to the best of its ability, especially on Switch, but the world also has a sense of openness. I will say it's a bit lifeless in terms of some of its areas, and that might sound like a massive criticism. It isn't, but if there's ever a sequel directly to this game, maybe there is and I haven't played it, but it would be nice in this universe to see a little more in terms of what you can do in the world itself. Although it's big and open, it's actually quite linear. Nier Automata is 40% off, $23.99 in the US, and regional equivalents, if available, are on your screen now. Hades needs absolutely no introduction. It's 99% sure that the final build of Hades 2 is pretty much done, and I would expect that we'll see that in 2024. I'm not sure if that's actually been announced, you'll have to let me know. But the original is 50% off. It's kind of set itself up as the granddaddy of roguelites, certainly up there with some of my favourites like The Binding of Isaac, and one of the most addictive games you will ever play. Now, Hades features, is it the son of the underworld or the prince of the underworld? And he's trying to get out basically. He's having a paddy, isn't he? He's annoyed. He's been sat watching Saturday morning cartoons for too long and he decides to escape. Now, what is very, very cool about this, and I think it's probably one of the things that sets it apart from any of its contemporaries, is how the storyline carries on over several runs, and you'll fight a boss and it will actually remember certain aspects of what you did. I remember reading a post, I think, by one of the writers saying how much work that was and then how few people actually realised it, but I realised it and it was amazing. Combat wise, it's very fast paced. You've got different weapons to choose from. It doesn't necessarily do anything particularly new. You clear an area, you choose a perk in terms of the door you go to next, and you go eventually through all the floors, beating the bosses, but it's the execution which really, really shines. Great game, well worth adding to your collection. It's £11.24 or your regional equivalent. It's great to see Death's Gambit Afterlife matching its cheapest ever price. It's been a long old time. Now, Death's Gambit was originally released to not critical acclaim, whatever the opposite of critical acclaim would be. Lots of people not happy with it. And then they finally updated it to the Afterlife version, improving almost every mechanic in the base experience. This also has a horse that you can ride from one side of the map to the other, which is awesome. And the level design is top drawer. Now, it's got fast-paced combat. There are 7 different classes here, and there are over 100 different talents that you can add to your skill tree. But the thing that really stood out to me were the monster designs and their animations. They're just quality. Now, there's a crafting system in here as well, and there's also 30 different weapons that you can unlock for your main character, including bows, scythes, longswords, and halberds. Halberd is a weird name, isn't it? I don't even know what... Actually, I do know what one of those is. It's that like long pole thing with like an axe at the end, isn't it? Pretty sure that's a halberd. And it also does have a new game plus here as well, which is cool. All I can think about are halberds now. I want to go and play that Mount and Blade. What a quality game that was. Love that on PC. But this one is on a sale of 40% off, taking it down to just over 10 quid until January the 3rd. Last but not least, on what I think is a banging list, is Borderlands 3. Well, I say it's last, it's not last. We've got our Savoy selection. But Borderlands 3 is half price already. 50% off, and it's just had another big patch which we covered in our all patched up Christmas special. Go check that out. A quality game. The only issue with the Nintendo Switch version, well, actually I say the only issue, there's a couple of issues. One of them is there's a bug in it at the moment in certain scenarios that can see some wiping of inventory items. Now, I've never experienced this, but I am told there is a very specific method with which you can recreate that. But yeah, like I say, I haven't had that. But the main issue for me is that it doesn't have 4-player online co-op. For 2 players, absolutely fine, hunky-dory, tickety-boo, but for any more than that, well, you're out of luck, I'm afraid. It just doesn't exist on the Switch, which I think is incredibly strange. Correct me if I'm wrong, once the netcode is in place, it shouldn't be a hardware limiting factor. Surely it's like the servers. So yeah, I don't know. It just feels a bit odd. It should be 4 players. I guess if you did have 4 players, then you have got more going on screen. You've got 4 characters that your Switch has to render. So maybe it is a hardware limiting factor and I'm just completely wrong. But yeah, still a good game, and now that it's half price after what, being out for a month or 2, that's yeah, nice pickup. And I did see a few people in the comments say, I'm waiting for this to hit 50%, so you are in luck, my friends. Let's knock out 3 quick Savaloys, games that are about the price of a UK Savaloy or a Costco hot dog or whatever it is you have, the Fetcook or yeah, whatever you have in your region. And first we've got Saints Row the Third, which is like GTA, I'm not going to say on steroids because that doesn't make any sense, that saying. It actually quite annoys me. It's like GTA, but programmed by 57 clowns with typewriters and monkey friends. It's absolutely bonkers. It's 80% off, taking it down to £3.19. But it's another one that holds up if you like the genre. Absolutely ridiculous. Loads of weapons that should not be in any game. And a game that you should not let your children anywhere near because they will come out scarred. Follow that up with something completely different, Siberia 3. Probably the worst in the Siberia series, which isn't the best selling point, but I love old school adventure games, and at 93% off, that's not bad. For £3 I'll pick it up. I can take some of the jankier elements. It still tells a reasonable enough story, if a little forgettable. And then Bad North, the Jotun edition. The Jotun edition, I went a bit weird there, didn't I? Jotun edition is 80% off. This is one of Glen's favourite games of all time. It takes it down to £2.69, and it's like a roguelite where you're on an island and you're fighting off hordes of Vikings attacking you. A very fun and addictive little experience. So that's it. I am not going to have an avoid because I don't want to, quite frankly. It's the end of the year. Let's finish on a positive. Do keep your eyes out. There'll be another episode of sales tomorrow so that we can cap off what is an absolutely cracking end of year 2023 for games and as well for sales. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Do make sure you save yourself some money. Use our discount to buy your eShop credit. It's code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg. Get it right, Walker? Alright, let's see if I can do a normal see ya. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya! Oh my goodness, that was perfect. Glen's gonna be upset. I thought my CEO was broken. Nice one.